section that you need? Okay, Judge.
Small instructions to the jury. Again, I just want to remind you, any statements made by an attorney, that is not evidence. Testimony, the exhibits, any stipulations, that's what's to be considered as evidence. Any comments to a prior hearing should be disregarded and shall be disregarded.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Stone, we talked about the gun being returned to Defendant Perez.
Yes.
Did the department then issue the gun to another officer?
I don't know.
Okay. There's no implication that Defendant Perez did anything wrong by changing this gun, right?
No.
All right. Is that sufficient? Is that sufficient, Judge? Do you think, to answer this question? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think we were talking about where the bullet and you traveled.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury the process you went through to take the bullet out of evidence and where you took it the first time?
Yes. So the first time I checked the bullet in question along with the test fires and the fragment was on June 1st of 2015, where I physically actually took the evidence with me, and I flew to California. I did not check the evidence into a bag. I actually the evidence flew with me on board in a briefcase.
Okay, how did you get through security?
I had contacted TSA prior and advised them of the evidence that I would be flying. And due to the fact that there was no actually live ammunition, I wasn't really breaking any protocols for TSA. But I did warn them ahead of time, so there was no issues at the security check where any fear of the evidence being taken from me.
Okay, and which are the exhibits that you took with you?
These three right here.
Can you identify them by exhibit number, please?
Exhibit number 54, exhibit number 55, and exhibit number 53B.
Okay, and when you checked them out and looked at the evidence tag that showed who'd had it, had anybody checked it out other than somebody associated with APD at the time you took it to California?
I didn't actually. I don't have access to that database, so I wouldn't know.
Okay.
The only thing I had was the sheet given to me the day that I checked the evidence out.
All right. And the person to ask about that would be Mr. Render?
Judge Leading.
Who is the person that would be able to talk about that?
Detective Render or someone from that actually works in evidence.
All right. You had no information that these three things had been anywhere else other than evidence. Is that right?
Judge Leading.
Was there any information that anything had been done to these other than that they were in evidence?
No.
Okay. And so what did you do with the bullets when you took them to California?
I flew them to Santa Ana, California, where I met with firearms examiner Rocky Edwards, who works for the Santa Ana Police Department.
Okay. And what did you do with them then?
I actually transferred custody to Rocky Edwards, where he checked them into the evidence hold at the Santa Ana Police Department.
And what was the purpose for you taking these items to Rocky Edwards?
He was going to do another ballistic examination of the bullet, the fragment, as well as the test fires.
Okay, and what happened? How long did he have custody of the bullets and the test fires?
He had custody of them for about a day. I went back that day on the, I think I went on the 2nd, and he did his examination on the 3rd. I came back and is when I got them back.
All right. And then where did you take them when you got them back?
Once I had the evidence signed back over to me, I flew back to Albuquerque, where on June 4th of 2015, I tagged them back into evidence.
And why did you do that?
Again, I was no longer in need to have them in my possession, and the examination and my travel process had been complete, so the proper way to handle the evidence is to tag it back into evidence.
All right. And did there come a time when you took it out of evidence again?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury about that, please?
Yes. So on June 8th of 2015, which was just 4 days later, I checked the evidence back out of the APD evidence hold, and at which point I flew the evidence again, going through TSA and having it in my briefcase. I flew to Montreal, Canada, to a laboratory over there, or an imaging place, and I'm not an expert on what this place does, but they did a scan of certain portions of the evidence while I was there. Now, I never actually transferred custody over to anybody there. The evidence was maintained in my custody, and I was there for the examination the entire time.
All right. And how was the scanning of the items done? Did you just hand everything to them and let them scan it, or was it done in a different way?
No, it was done in one item at a time, which I put in my report. So the analysis, her name is Deborah, and I can't pronounce her last name, and I apologize.
Desrosiers?
Desrosiers, thank you. She was the one that performed took the scans of the evidence, and I would hand her one test fire or one bullet at a time, and she would do one scan at a time.
And why did you do it so carefully like that?
I didn't want to get anything messed up. I didn't want to get one test fire put in the wrong bag. So instead of just opening up the bag and dumping everything out, or opening both bags and dumping it out, I would just make a slit. I would take the one out that I had been told to take out, and I would give it to her.
All right. And then after the scans were made of one entire exhibit in one bag, what did you do as far as sealing up the bag again?
Once, because I have to make a slit every time I want to do that, I would put an evidence seal over the slit, and I would put my like a little date of the time that it was sealed.
Okay. After all of this was done, what did you do with this evidence?
Once that examination was complete, I then flew back to Albuquerque. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I did not fly to Albuquerque. I then flew the evidence back to Santa Ana, California, where I again transferred it over to Rocky Edwards, where he was going to take a few weeks to complete his examination.
And again, Rocky Edwards is at the Santa Ana Police Department? What police department does he work for?
Santa Ana Police Department.
And what did he do, and where did he keep the evidence while he had it and was doing work on them?
He had it with him at his police station evidence hold at Santa Ana, California.
Then what did you do with the evidence? What was your next contact with these particular evidence?
So on July 9th of prior to July 9th, I flew back to Santa Ana, California once Rocky had contacted me and told me that he was complete with his examination. I then picked up the evidence, he checked it out, transferred it over to me, and I flew it back to Albuquerque, New Mexico, again through TSA in my bag, and where on July 9th of 2015, I tagged it into evidence.
Right. And where did it stay until it came to court?
It stayed in evidence.
And who brought it to this courthouse?
I did.
And is that, do you recognize that is the, let me ask you by exhibit number, that exhibit 53B is the bullet that you flew all around the country with?
Yes.
And where was that bullet taken from, Mr. Boyd, again?
His left deltoid.
Okay, and then 55 are the test fires that you've discussed that you flew around the country with?
That's correct.
Okay. And what is 54?
54 is also test fires from, this one's, 54 is from firearm 1, which is going to be the Noveski firearm, and then firearm 2 is going to be the test fires from the JP Enterprises rifle. Okay,
Your Honor, I would move those exhibits.
Object based on lack of foundation from the original custody of them.
Okay.
No objection.
53B, 55, 54, and
when you returned the firearm to defendant Perez, did it have the scope that's depicted in this picture here on it when you returned it?
I didn't return it, so I don't
Or
know.
again, when it got returned, let me rephrase my question. When it got returned to him,
I don't know what condition it was returned to him in.
and I guess I'm asking, was it returned with the aim point scope on it?
It should have been.
All right. Were you asked to try to retrieve the aim point scope that was on Defendant Perez's rifle?
Yes.
Okay. Who owns both the rifle and the scope?
The Albuquerque Police Department.
So what did you do to try to go and get the aim point scope that had been on Defendant Perez's rifle at the time of the shooting?
I contacted the then supervisors of the SWAT team, Sergeant Jason Westbrook and Alex Katzis.
And can you take the jury through how you got it back, or whether you were able to get it back?
Sure. So because I knew that those particular items were assigned, they're owned by the Albuquerque Police Department, assigned to the SWAT team. So when I called the supervisors, I told them that I needed to track down these items and I needed to get them back. So the first one that I tried to track down was the actual aim point, which is this item right here that you see on top of the rifle. I did have the serial number for it because pictures were taken of the serial number that night when it was collected from Officer Dominic Perez. So I provided the serial number to the supervisors at the SWAT team, in which time it took them about a week, but they were able to track it down.
All right, and were you able to retrieve that?
Yes.
Scope? And let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 48A. Can you identify that, please, Detective Stoss?
Yes, it's a still photograph from SWAT Officer Perez's helmet camera.
All right, and does that photograph contain is the firearm depicted in there as well as the aim point scope?
Yes.
Your Honor, I need 48A. Any objection?
It's 48A.
No objection.
48A is the one.
You can zero that out, maybe, Detective Stone. Okay, and what I'd like you to focus on, first of all, when in the sequence of events during the shooting was this photograph taken? Or was this still, when does it occur? Is it before or after the first shot is fired?
It's before the first shot is fired.
All right. Can you, and I've got a glare on this thing here. Let me see if I can move this over. There you go. What I'd like you to do is show the jury in this still where the aim point scope is, please.
Sure. So here's the rifle that you're seeing, and here's the aim point attached to the top of the rifle.
All right. And what is this black thing on top of the rifle? This that's to the right that you just sort of drew a line through there.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
That is the magnifier that is set off to the right-hand side. So that's an indicator that the magnifier is not in use.
And if you wanted to magnify the picture, how would you go about using this?
You would take this device right here and you would rotate it until it would come into position and align with the aim point, or
Right.
yeah, with the aim point device.
In relation to where, can you give the jury some feel for where Defendant Perez is in this photograph? And maybe you can zero
Sure.
that. Okay.
So, would you be able to go back to the picture of him, the overall picture of him in the crime van?
Sure.
It's going to be the easiest way.
Okay.
So, as you're looking at Officer Dominic Perez, right here is the helmet camera in which is actually taking the video. So if you go back to the other picture,
All right.
so you'll notice that it's on the right side of his head. So as it's attached to the helmet, so basically his head is going to be kind of right over here, and his body is down below, approximately. If that
All
makes
right.
sense.
Given that configuration, approximately how close is his eye to the aim point scope?
You know, it's because I never investigated the actual distance from his face to the actual aim point, but it's going to be a few inches.
Right. Did he have his eye directly up, looking through the aim point scope at this time?
You mean like was his face actually touching the scope?
Yes, sir.
No.
All right. And it's I guess my layman's understanding of weaponry. When you sight through a scope, do you always have to put your eye right up to the scope to be able to look through it?
No.
Okay. And with the aim point scope, why is that not the case?
That's not how they're designed, and you wouldn't be able to really fire the weapon effectively. It just wouldn't really work that way. It's designed so it actually sits within a few inches away from your eye, so you can actually look through it and get a clearest picture possible through the sighting system, so you can actually utilize the red dot that's in there. If it's suppressed right up to your face, one that takes away your entire view of the of everything around you, and now all you have is just what's through the scope, and that sometimes doesn't always help out. Two, you wouldn't really be able to operate the weapon system the way it's configured like that. You wouldn't be able to fire effectively. You wouldn't be able to be accurate with the rifle or so on and so forth, because the way the buttstock's in and the way that the weapon's designed. And three, if you were ever to put a scope up, now the recoil of this rifle is not so that it's that bad, but on other rifles like the one from Jim Purdue, if you were to put your face right up against the scope itself and it's actually touching your face and you pull the trigger, you're probably going to get a black eye.
Because
the recoil.
Okay, all right. Were you able to find and locate Defendant Perez's the aim point scope that Defendant Perez was using this evening?
Yes.
Let me hand you what's remarked as 54C. And can you identify that, please?
Yes, this is the aim point that you're seeing in the picture here that was affixed to Officer Don Perez's rifle at the time of the shooting.
And is it in the same or substantially similar condition as it was at the time of the shooting?
It appears to be, yes.
Do you have any indication or evidence that this has been altered in any way from the time of the shooting?
No.
Your Honor, I'd move 54C into evidence.
I'd like the court to note for the record the objections made previously.
Your Honor.
54C is admitted, and just so the record's clear,
I can't hear you, Your Honor, if you don't talk.
just so the record's clear, I think previously I said 54 is admitted, but there's different letters associated with this particular number. So it was actually 54D is in date. So 54D was previously admitted, 54C is admitted.
All right, Judge. Detective Stone, can you take that out of the evidence bag, and can you explain, if I can have him step down, maybe, Your Honor, in front of the jury and explain how this works?
Sure. So this is what I'm referring to when we're talking about the micro aim point that was on Officer Perez's rifle. So the way it works is actually this is the image you're going to look through. Okay, it has a lens, and then this is another lens on the other side of the view that's looking out. Okay, so inside when you look through here, and it is turned on right now, there's going to be a red dot. Now there's different intensities that this red dot can be set at, and the reason for that is because when you're operating outside, obviously the sunlight changes, so you'll have low light days or low light time during the day, and then high peak Sundays, sun hours. So in order to ramp up the intensity of the dot, you will click this button here, which is the largest button, the largest kind of knob that you're seeing here on the right side of the scope itself. And as you turn it, it will click, and that is what changes the intensity of the red dot. And there are different settings. There's a few nighttime settings, and then there's daytime settings. Okay? And then you'll notice that there's two other knobs right here. These are actually caps. Okay? And this is for windage and elevation. This is actually how you zero the scope itself, the aimpoint itself, to the rifle. So what I mean by that is, if I was just to take this out of the package and put it on the rifle and then shoot a bullet at a target, say the size of a dollar bill, there's no guarantee that I'm actually going to hit what I'm aiming at, because it's not zero to the rifle. So what I have to do is I have to shoot a couple rounds at what the red dot is aiming at. So basically, if I want to shoot at the center of my tie, I will put the red dot at the center of my tie. So for elevation, say I am aiming at the center of my tie right here, and the bullet strikes up here. So I will use the elevation knob to actually make minor adjustments of the red dot, and I will bring the strike of the round down to where I'm aiming. So that is how elevation works, and that's up and down. So that's elevation. So when you're talking about windage, that's left and right. So again, if I'm aiming at the center of my tie and I shoot a bullet and say it hits to the left of the target that I'm aiming at, I will use the windage knob and I will make slight adjustments to the red dot inside until I bring the strike of the round to where I'm aiming at. And that is how you zero the device, and in a sense, that's how it works.
Okay, Detective Stone, somebody who's on the SWAT team, would that have been done before they got to the scene here?
Yes. Within the Albuquerque Police Department, you have to go through firearms qualifications throughout the year. The SWAT team has to do even more qualifications than, say, just the regular patrol officer. So with that, they will have zeroed their rifle prior to qualifications. And then these things are designed, these scopes are designed to hold their zero. So which means it's not after you leave the firing range, they're going to lose their zero. So, and the reason for that is it's not practical to every time you show up to a scene to find a place to shoot at a target and make sure you're on zero before you go and address whatever threat may exist.
Okay, so if I'm your target and you're using that scope to sight me in, can you show the jury how that works?
So again, it's going to be sitting on a rifle like this, and so you're going to have to imagine it being on a rifle. And when it's affixed to the rifle and the rifle's in your buttstock, you have to have good cheek to buttstock contact in order to keep your head in place. And from there is when you're going to make a movement with, and I use my hands to bring it into the pocket of my shoulder, the buttstock, the pocket of my shoulder. And because I'm right eye dominant, I'm going to use my right eye to look through the sight. And for me, where the rifle sits right about here is where is what I'm talking about with the distance between my eye and the back of the sight itself. So that is generally how it works.
And the way where you put it for distance may be different than how other officers put the scope on the rifle for distance?
Yes, every officer is different. The distance between the eye to here, which eye they use, whether they have both eyes open and one eye open, each individual is different. It all depends on where they're comfortable.
With this kind of sight, do you have to still line up sights on a person, or how does it work?
Line up sights on it.
Yeah. Only when you would have a front sight and a back sight.
Okay, so she's talking about iron sights.
Right.
So iron sight, you would have a rear sight aperture and a front sight post. And in order for that to work, you would have to look through the rear sight aperture, which is like a circle, and you would take, say, your front sight post, which is your finger, and you're trained to know exactly where you would line up that front sight post with the target in order to be on target in zero.
And which one is easier to do?
In my experience, the aim points are easier to use than the iron sights.
And which one's faster?
This would be faster in my experience.
All right, Your Honor, I would request permission, if this is a good time for breaking, or do you want us to continue?
No, this is fine.
I would request permission to be able to give the red dot sight to the jury so they can.
I'll take a recess. Ladies and gentlemen, let me have you return to the first floor of J 70 room around 1 o'clock. I'll give you till 10 after 1, so we can travel. Please stand for the truth.